Hey everyone, it's DXM. So in this video, I kind of wanted to go over all of the stuff that's happening in 10.2 as it pertains to our Druid and keys, because there's a lot of changes. And I've had a couple weeks now to test some of the keys, test how our Druid feels in the keys, and I think I have somewhat of an informed opinion now, in terms of how things might play out when the season launches. Obviously, we're still in pretty early days on PTR, so things are still subject to change. Odds are some of the stuff I talk about here might be changed, or strategies might be different, or talent choices might change, or whatever. But, you know, at least as it stands currently, these are just going to be my current thoughts on where things are going for our Druid in 10.2. Again, specifically with keys, because I don't really raid and I don't really do arena. Probably the most important thing I have to talk about is the tier set for our Druid. The tier set for our Druid as it stands is one of the best tier sets I think they've ever made for a healer in keys. Right now, and historically, our Druid always struggles with spot healing. It's not very good at, oh shit, someone just took some damage, let me heal them back up really quickly. This tier set practically reverses that to turning our Druid into one of the best spot healers in keys as long as you play around it properly. So what it does, obviously you guys can read, but you and your Grove Guardian's nourishes now heal 2 additional allies within 45 yards at 40% effectiveness. So that's just free extra AoE healing whenever you press Grove Guardians. And your 4 set, which is the super strong part about this tier set, consuming clear casting now causes your regrowth to also cast Nourish onto a nearby injured ally at 200% effectiveness, preferring those with your heal over time effects. As far as I can tell, that part where it says preferring those with your heal over time effects, as long as the person has any hot, it'll smart, if let's say all 5 people have hots on them, it'll smart heal the lowest health person, as far as I can tell. But it could also just be completely random, but as far as I can tell, it's smart heals based on HP, assuming everyone else has hots on them. And it can be literally any hot. It can be Spring Blossoms, it can be Cultivation, it doesn't have to be very much, so it's not a very hard core set to use or worry about. And the reason why this is so strong is because Nourish itself is a pretty strong heal. The problem historically with why you don't take it is because it's an extra keybind, and it's a very specific keybind. You only really would press Nourish in a situation where someone needed that much healing, and in keys it just wasn't very feasible, especially because you didn't really run mastery in keys that much. Kind of unnecessary healing, and while it did shore up, especially with Wild Synthesis, it did shore up a little bit of problem with it. It's still just not very good. There's other ways you can deal with situations that Nourish could fill up, especially now that we have Grove Guardians, which is just a strictly better Nourish in almost every scenario. So now all of our regrowths pretty much cast a Nourish that does twice the healing of one of our talented Nourishes. In practicality, it's a lay on hands almost. Not quite, obviously, because it requires some setup, so the person that it heals has to have a good amount of hots on them already in order for it to heal for a lot. But assuming that you have people hotted up, this makes it so that if someone gets spiked in a pack where you know people are going to take a lot of damage, and you have all your hots set up, now get into these situations where someone might get hit to 70%, you would regrowth them, and someone else could be 40%, and that person that's 40% is also just going to get practically lay on hands from 40% to full. Assuming you set up for that properly, and that is super strong for our Druid. Being able to pretty much on reaction top someone from that low is incredibly strong. And one important thing to note about it though is it only works if you consume clear casting. So what this means now is I'm pretty sure we're going to be running Tranquil Mind, so we get 2 stacks of clear casting, and clear casting procs more. It's just a really good talent. This means, because we have the extra spot healing, that means we don't need Passing Seasons or Nature's Splendor, or I think even improved regrowth. We don't need these anymore because our tier set fills in the holes that these were supposed to help us with. Now we take Tranquil Mind, get that extra stack of clear casting, and have it proc more. You're pretty much always going to have clear casting up for whenever you want to spend that tier set. Something else to note that I think is kind of a weird gameplay, I don't want to say problem, it's a weird gameplay interaction, is, you know, I can proc clear casting, right? But something like NS, If I NS regrowth, because that's just habit, right? You see someone spike, you hit, you Swiftman, get an NS regrowth, it hits for a lot. It doesn't consume the clear casting, and thus if you use NS with a regrowth, it's not going to use your tier, and you're not going to get that lay on hands effect. It's not going to happen. It's kind of a weird interaction. It almost encourages you to not press Nature's Swiftness. It's kind of weird in that regard, because Nature's Swiftness, practically what it does is just make that regrowth instant. Compared to the tier set, the only advantage it has over the tier set is make it instant, and in some scenarios, you don't need it to be instant. So there's going to be a lot of times where you're probably going to sacrifice NSing somebody just because your tier set's better. It's kind of a weird interaction in keys. I'm not the biggest fan of it. I wish they would change it so that, you know, your NS would still consume a clear casting, because the situations where you wouldn't want your NS to consume a clear casting is pretty rare. Like, it's not that big of a deal if it happens. It would make the tier set feel a little less clunky in that regard, because it almost feels like you're not encouraged to press Nature's Swiftness anymore. Actually, it could be to where we don't even take NS because of that. You probably will take NS, but that's just something to keep in mind as an interaction that happens. Long story short, the tier set is really, really good. Again, probably the best tier set healers have gotten in keys for a long time. That's my personal opinion. And it completely changes the strength of a lot of talents and a lot of gameplay decisions. The next thing I want to talk about feeds directly into the tier set is Incarn. You might notice I have Incarn talented and not Convoke. And the reason why is strictly just because of the tier set. So they change Incarn a little bit. Cenarius Guidance no longer reduces the cooldown per Life Bloom proc that you get. Now, Cenarius Guidance reduces the cooldown based on how many Grove Guardians you have that fade within its cooldown. You can get this down to about 2 minutes-ish, assuming you're pressing trees off cooldown, which is pretty good. But the most important thing about this is during Incarn Tree of Life, you summon a Grove Guardian every 10 seconds. So this means you get 3 Grove Guardians for every Incarn you do, for free, completely free. That's a lot of extra healing. Probably the best part about this, though, and the best part about running Incarn currently is it turns all of your regrowths instant, and when you're proccing a lot of them with Tranquil Mind, you're getting a lot of 4-set procs. Currently, Incarn Tree of Life feels absurdly strong in keys to me. I've talked with other R-Druids and some other R-Druids, like Seraphine XD. He's told me that he still likes Convoke and stuff. I've yet to test Convoke that much, because currently in keys, there's some situations that I don't think are really even possible to heal without an R-Druid in Incarn. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that. This does a lot of healing. I'll show a clip right now of a poll that we did in Black Recalled that I don't know that any other healer could have done. Some context for this clip. Our Druid at this time was bugged. Swarm wasn't working on PTRs, so we were nerfed just in this clip alone by a lot by virtue of Swarm just not even working properly.
Where's he going? Oh my god, he's playing ult. I have aggro.
Left.
Any listers? Thank you, Remy.
You know?
Dude, I am a god right now. Holy.
Why did I cheat then?
You might notice in that clip, I was nearing 300k HPS for a very long time. And that isn't just the only pull where I've had that happen. I've had pulls in Atal Dazar where if you start going to the right and you lost that whole pull and whatever, it's practically the same thing. And another thing you have to keep in mind is we're scaled to 440 eye level. I'm at a worse eye level than my retail R-Druid, and I'm doing like twice the healing of it currently as it stands. It is incredibly strong, I think, to run Incarn. Obviously, you do lose some damage with Convoke the Spirits, but I never thought Convoke the Spirits was that worth as a damage cooldown anyway. It's good. In terms of keeping your team alive, Incarn is just strictly better, especially since Flourish has been massively nerfed. So that, I think, brings Convoke a step down by a lot, and the changes to Incarn bump it up significantly. Something else to talk about is they've finally, for everyone, as far as I can tell, they've been bouncing back and forth between removing Circle and not removing Circle on PTR, but I think they finally decided that they want to do away with Circle. Circle is gone. Circle of Life and Death is gone. Instead, we get Liveliness, and there's an important distinction with Liveliness. On the surface, this might look like just a worse version of Circle, right? But it's not. It's actually, for damage, this is better than Circle, and for healing, it's a bit worse because it's less bursty, but it's not that bad. So the difference primarily between this and Circle that your brain might be overlooking just because of how it's worded is it says deal their damage 25% faster. With Circle, it said, I believe, within less time. And that's an important distinction because this means all of your stuff just ticks faster. There's no duration reduction. There's no, Sunfire going from 18 seconds to 15 seconds. None of that. It just makes all of your stuff tick faster within its 18-second duration, which is pretty huge. That is a substantial change, at least as far as damage goes, compared to Circle. It's just more damage, and it's a lot easier to manage your dots. And it's a lot easier to manage your HOTS. Obviously, again, I still think it's worse for healing than Circle. Circle was just a lot burstier, and if you could play around it, just did a lot of healing, especially with Verdancy. Liveliness is strictly just better for damage. It's so much better, in fact, that I actually think you don't ever play without Liveliness, especially with the extra clear casting procs that we get with Tranquil of Mind. We really, as far as I can tell, don't run into that many mana issues anymore, especially since they've shifted around some values as far as spells go. I feel like Liveliness now is probably going to be the new version of Circle that you're probably just going to always take. And for everyone else, except for me, because I'm a bit weird, I actually really liked Circle. I liked the gameplay shift. This should be an awesome change, and our Druid should feel much less restrictive in keys. So that's another huge gameplay shift to talk about. Another thing that I want to touch on is Nature's Vigil versus Heart of the Wild, and I want to talk about this because Flourish, as we all know, got massively changed. You probably have seen by now, if you've looked into anything to do with our Druid in 10.2, you've probably seen the change to Flourish, but if not, I'll go over it real quick. Flourish is now a 1-minute cooldown, and instead of extending heal over time effects by 8 seconds and increasing the rate by 100%, it's now by 6 seconds, increasing the rate by 25%. It's a pretty substantial nerf. The reason why it was nerfed so bad, as far as I'm aware, is because of Raid. Because in Raid, if an R-Druid ramped, they could keep the entire raid alive just alone with this button, and because it was on such a short cooldown, it was very reliable and led to R-Druid doing a lot of healing, more than other healers. Personally, I don't think it should have been nerfed that hard. I think they could have made it 50%, increased the rate of your heal over time effects by 50%, and kept it at 1.5 minutes, or even if they're going to bring it down to 1 minute, still make it 50%. I think that would have been a good middle ground. But this leads to an interaction problem with our Druid where, okay, we have this 1 minute cooldown, and by the way, I still think you're going to play Flourish in keys. It's still a decent 1 minute healing cooldown. But now there's a problem with our Druid where Nature's Vigil, which was a lot of our damage, that was a lot of our game plan in keys, where you would ramp pretty much off cooldown. Now this is really awkward. You have Incarnation, which is about a 2-ish minute cooldown, and you have Flourish, which is a 1 minute cooldown, and you have Nature's Vigil, which is a 1.5 minute cooldown. So what does this mean? My personal take, as it stands right now on PTR, is that we don't take Nature's Vigil in keys. I have to do some more testing with it to see if I can find a sweet spot as to when you would press it in keys. But I think instead of taking Nature's Vigil, I think we instead go Renewal or 1 minute Roar and go Heart of the Wild. Or possibly, we could even go back down to Protector of the Pack. Possibly. I'm not sure yet on how that would be accomplished with the current talent tree, but it's probably, to me, looking like Heart of the Wild. For a couple reasons. One, you get more utility with Renewal and 1 minute Roar. And with the changes to Starfire, Heart of the Wild on some trash packs for AoE can actually do a lot of damage. Reducing the cast time, Starfire as it stands, not only did it not do that much damage, the cast time really put a hamper on how much throughput you can actually do with it. Having that cast time reduction of 30% with Starfire is massive in terms of a gameplay shift. It really does feel like Starfire is almost like a Wrath in terms of cast time when you press Heart of the Wild, and Heart of the Wild lasts a very long time. I think you get like 20% uptime on Heart of the Wild if you just press it off cooldown. It's a pretty good talent. That's, as it stands currently, where I think things are headed. There might be some interactions. Again, I still have to test Nature's Vigil, see if there's any scenarios where you can actually get Nature's Vigil to do a lot of reliable healing. But that whole playstyle that we used to have of ramping every minute and a half to do a lot of damage with Nature's Vigil, that's pretty much gone. Instead, when you press Nature's Vigil, it's probably going to be with something like Incarn Tree of Life, because you do so much healing within Incarn. Nature's Vigil might pop off there. It could be something where you instead hold Nature's Vigil for every single Incarn. That could be the case. Again, I have to do more testing. We're still in relatively early days in the PTR. But that is where my mind is leading towards. Some of the problems that still persist is stuff like short Iron Bark. It kind of sucks that, again, HPEL, you know, they get 1 minute sack, and it's just, not only is it a shorter cooldown, they don't really lose throughput for having it, and it's just a bigger DR. Our 1 minute sack, still, we lose throughput and stuff like Cultivation. I don't think we take Trank. That's something else that I should touch on, is we don't take Trank, I think, currently, because Grove Guardians has been buffed with the tier set. Incarn does so much healing. And we still have, you know, a decent cooldown with Flourish, where I think now Tranquility is just obsolete in a lot of scenarios. It's not, again, it's not the literal worst healing cooldown on the planet. It's really not very good. And I currently can't see us justifying having Tranquility anymore in keys. It just doesn't do enough, unfortunately. And you'd rather have something, I think, like Reforestation. Because of how strong Incarn is, now Reforestation is incredibly strong. Being able to... It's a little bit awkward because, again, you can't shift back into this Tree of Life form. If you proc Reforestation, you need to commit to it, otherwise you just kind of lose value on it. Get into that, you know, weird territory with Reforestation, but with how strong the spot healing is for our Druid, I think Reforestation might actually make a comeback. And if not Reforestation, obviously you can put a point into Budding Leaves, you can maybe put a point into Trank if you think you need it for some reason. You could put it into Cultivation to help with proccing your Force Set, because your Force Set only really procs on people that have Hots in them, so Cultivation would make it more likely for you to have Hots on people, etc., etc. But as it stands, I think Reforestation is pretty good, and unfortunately Trank just doesn't make the cut anymore. If we're playing Incarnation Tree of Life. Now, an important thing to note is we do just do, as far as I can tell, we do just do slightly less damage now on the PTR compared to live with the nerf to Nature's Vigil. But that could just be a gameplay shift. I could just have to get better with Heart of the Wild and figure out how to make up for that damage with Heart of the Wild. But I would expect to take a noticeable dip in damage when this patch comes around because of the Nature's Vigil loss and the Flourish interaction. What that means is we might be playing actual damage trinkets. I've yet to decide on which trinket specifically, but when I figure that out, I'll let you guys know. Some important trinkets that I do want to go over that I think will be influential. Ashes of the Emperor Soul. It used to be bugged on the PTR, it was absurdly overtuned. Now I think it's just a good trinket. It's just a 2-minute on use. You get a bunch of int that decays, you know, over 20 seconds. But when the circumstances are dire, you can get that effect again. I'm not too sure what this means right now. I don't think a lot of people are too sure exactly what it means when circumstances are dire. I think I've heard someone say when someone hits 10% HP, this will proc. That's a dire circumstance. This can be a good emergency, I need to do some healing trinket. This is probably just a solid all-around trinket. We get some haste, which is pretty good for our Druid. Another trinket that might be pretty good is the new beacon, Belorelos. I think this is still a worse beacon, because if you look at the numbers, this at 463 still does less than a 441 beacon, which is pretty surprising. It's got a slightly lower cooldown, but not enough to, I think, make up for the damage. This also does damage to you as well. Something to keep your eye on as a trinket. It comes from the raid. There's a lot of trinkets in these keys. Some of them are pretty good. Obviously, we have Echoing Tearstone. That's a decent trinket. You know, just stack up the healing for whenever you think you might need it, and, you know, cheat death someone basically whenever they get low. It's not that amazing of a trinket anymore post-nerf, but it's decent. Lady Wakerest Music Box, I don't think is going to be played specifically because you want to have that 2-set, and the ring for our Druid is terribly statted. It's really, really, really bad. Caged Horror is okay. Vessel of Skittering Shadows is okay. Oakheart's Gnarled Root, I think actually does the most damage of all the trinkets I've tested so far. It's okay. Corrupted Starlight, it's, again, okay. Blossom of Emirdrasil, which just comes from the raid. I think this is terrible. My testing, this does like no healing overall. Pip's Emerald Friendship Badge is probably going to be just a default like good stat trinket because it is just free secondary stats sometimes, and as we've seen throughout Dragonflight, that tends to be the meta. Stuff like Ominous Chromatic Essence, what's that other one from Season 1, Whispering Incarnate Icon, I still have it in my bags. So those are just some trinkets to keep your eye on if you ever get around to looking at stuff in 10.2. And I think for this video, I think so far, that is about the extent of it. Obviously, when I come up with some more stuff that I think is video worthy, I will talk about it, and I will do my best to let you guys know. Again, I just really do want to stress that this is pretty early days in the PTR. We still don't even have a release date for the patch, so things are subject to change. This is just where my mind has led me in the testing that I've done, and I've done quite a few keys. I think on PTR I may have done already like 100 keys on PTR on our Druid alone. Take that into account. I recommend you guys get on PTR, test a lot of this stuff yourself, because one, not only does our Druid feel really fun, having actual reactive healing with the tier set is such a nice gameplay feeling. I play PTR more than I play retail. That should tell you just how much more fun I'm having. Try stuff out for yourself. There's a lot of stuff I haven't gotten around to testing yet. Again, I haven't really tested many interactions with Nature's Vigil yet because I just think inherently the disconnect in cooldowns is really awkward for Nature's Vigil's throughput. And the cooldowns that you would want to rely on, like Incarn, not reliable to use for strictly just damage, I don't think. So, but again, test stuff out yourself. And let me know in the comments what you guys think. Anyway, that was just my thoughts. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. I hope to see you guys on my Twitch, twitch.tv/DXMWow. And yeah, later.